Hina is a junior researcher at ZEFP.
So the topic of my presentation is participation by necessity, female labor force cohort analysis in Pakistan. And this is first chapter from my thesis. So here is the outline of my presentation. So as we all know that women constitute almost 50% of the world population, yet their contribution to economic activity is far below their potential. And there exist substantial differences in female labor force participation across the globe. For example, for developed countries, there's a common trend of rising female labor force participation, while for developing countries, the trend is heterogeneous. And South Asia presents a gloomy picture of female labor force participation. And you can see in the graph, which shows changes in female labor force participation over 1990 till 2020 for South Asian countries. And you can see that the trend is heterogeneous. Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan witnessed an increase in female labor force participation over the last 3 decades, while it has declined for India and Sri Lanka. Being economists, we usually use neoclassical labor supply model to take into account the labor supply decisions by comparing competing utility gains from work and leisure in a single time period. However, in the real world, labor market decisions work differently, and especially for females, the labor market decisions are dynamic in nature because females enter into and exit from the labor market at different points in their lives. And for Pakistan, there's a dearth of literature that examines the dynamics of female labor force participation. So the main objective of my study is to see how female labor force participation has evolved over the last 3 decades. So there are 2 strands of literature that provides a basis to develop the objectives of my study. First is the theory of demographic transition, which shows the changes in population structure starting from high birth rates and death rates, along with low technological advancement, education, development, to lower birth rates and death rates accompanying improved technology, education, and development. So the first objective is to investigate the contribution of demographic changes to the change in aggregate female labor force participation in Pakistan. And the corresponding hypothesis is that changes in population share account for substantial changes in aggregate female labor force participation. Because for Pakistan, there's a gradual increase of females in total population, like from 46% in 1960 to 49% in 2019. Second strand of literature relies on age, period, and cohort model and aims to analyze the determinants of dynamics of female labor force participation by decomposing total change into age, period, and cohort components. For age component, the hypothesis is that female labor force participation over the life cycle depends on the timing of education, children, and retirement. For period or year component, a female labor force participation follows a pro-cyclical behavior. And for the last cohort component, my hypothesis is that improved educational attainment, lower fertility rates, and changed social norms allow younger cohorts to participate more in the labor force. So I constructed a synthetic panel from repeated cross-sections of nationally representative labor force surveys. Labor force surveys provide data on socio-demographic characteristics of total population, for example, on age, sex, marital status, education, and employment. And unfortunately, due to COVID-19, I couldn't go to the field work, so I make use of the secondary data set that were available and identified cohorts and follows them over time, where cohorts are defined by date of birth. So I calculated labor force participation rates for each cohort and kind of did analysis on the different levels of education, marital status, and location, and divided labor force participation rates of females into different age groups, comprising of, I guess, 15 age groups. These are some insights from my descriptive analysis, and you can see that female labor force participation by cohort, and it shows that younger cohorts participate more in the labor force. As, for example, for the age group of 45 and 49, you can see that highest participation is from 1970 cohort, followed by 1965 and so on. This graph also shows that females participate more in the labor force during their 30s and 40s, and it also kind of confirmed the existence of a U-shaped curve over the life cycle of females. As I told you that there are more female in population over the years, and this is quite evident in the left side panel, where I'm showing the female population as a percentage of total population for different age categories and for different years. And you can see that there are more females in working age category in 2017 if you compare it with 1990. This might have translated into their higher labor force participation in 2017 or over the years, you can say. Another important source of increased female labor force participation over the years might be the increased education level of females. And many researchers, they kind of show that there's a positive relationship between female labor force participation and education level. And this relationship is quite evident in the left side panel, which shows that across the cohorts, there is an increased female labor force participation from the women with tertiary education, primary and secondary education, but you can also see that female participation is also increasing across the cohort for females with no formal education, although their share in the population is decreasing steadily over the years. The methods I used for my analysis are the decomposition methods. First is the simple decomposition that kind of disaggregate total female labor force participation between the year T and the base year into three components. The first component in the second equation shows the population effect. Second is the behavioral effect. While third is the interaction term, which shows simultaneous changes in the first two components. And second method is the age period and cohort model, which aims to separate age period and cohort effects for a particular outcome of interest. And here the outcome of interest is a female labor force participation. These are the results of the first decomposition method, and you can see that in the last row, change in the age structure of population accounted only for 0.048 percentage points of the 7.465 percentage point increase in female labor force participation over the last 3 decades. So I can reject the first hypothesis, and you can say that the changes in female labor force participation over the years are not because of the changes in the demographic structure of population. These are the results of age period and cohort modeling. First, the age profile shows that total female labor force participation follows an inverted U-shaped curve, which shows that labor force participation increases in early adulthood, stays the same, and then start declining after retirement. And the lower panel shows the urban female labor force participation, which was an M-shaped curve, and the dip represents the child raising age when females kind of decrease their labor force participation. Cohort profile shows that female labor force participation starts increasing for the cohorts born after 1950s, plateaued around 1990, and starts to decline more recently. And the lower panel shows that married female labor force participation is kind of increasing for the cohorts born after 1950. It shows an increasing trend over the years. The year effect shows the pro-cyclicality of female labor force participation in Pakistan. It's higher for the years when GDP growth rate was higher and lower for the years when GDP growth rate was lower. For instance, between 1993 and 2003, there was the GDP growth rate of Pakistan was less than 5%, which might have translated into their lower labor force participation. So the main conclusion of my study first is that changing demographic composition accounts for a very small change in the female labor force participation. And if this trend continues, it is very unlikely for Pakistan to reap the benefits of the demographic dividend that we're having now. And female labor market behavior shows that women participate more in the labor force is driven by necessity rather than intent. Because the age profiles and cohort profiles especially shows that high participation of females from rural areas and females with no formal education. These are some of the policy recommendations based on my analysis. First, regarding age period and cohort analysis, there is a need to provide childcare services, especially for urban women, and improving access to tertiary education. And important pull factors that are identified by other researchers include investment in education, especially tertiary education, more progressive gender attitudes, individual ability and personality traits, especially higher aspirations, and family-friendly work environment, diversified occupation choices because most of the females in Pakistan are involved in rural farm-based activities, and access to safe transport. Thank you so much.